who are longtime partners with public educational and government channels across the country. Our partner presentations are meant to help connect our members with products and services that help us do our mission better and help us create work that's more meaningful for our communities. And Telvue is going to be talking a little bit about how their work helps us do that. So we'd like to make sure that you have plenty of time for questions and discussion on today's broadcast. If you've got questions specifically for Telvue during the course of today's partner presentation, go ahead and use the Q&A function here on Zoom, and I'll have a chance to be able to help out with our questions as they come in during the course of today's presentation. Now let me turn things over to Jesse Lerman. You may know him as the president and CEO of Telvue Corporation, longtime partners with PEG channels across the country, who's here to join us and talk about ways in which we can connect with communities and build audience through innovation that they're focusing on. Jesse, welcome to the broadcast and take it away.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate the introduction. Thanks, everyone. First off, for National ACM Conference. So disappointed, of course, that we can't do that this year, but of course, excited to talk to you today on this webinar. And with that said, I'll dive into today's presentation. So let me share my screen here. Go into, actually, oh, there we go, perfect. And here we go. Okay. So everyone see my screen loading up here. Looks like it's going a little slow. There we go. Excellent. So today we're going to talk about expanding viewership and accessibility with advanced time-saving automation. So first, just to set the stage here, talk about a few different ways that you can expand viewership. A few ways to do that. One is, of course, to add more programming, whether that's increasing your meeting coverage and running more live meetings. Another thing you could do is tap into new sources of live IP streams. That can be an excellent way to add more programming. And also look at file sharing platforms like the Media Exchange or archive.org, other excellent sources to find new programming for your channels. Another way to expand viewership is to improve the quality of your channels. So viewers are more likely to tune in and stay tuned in. So whether that's adding more broadcast graphics for a more professional look and feel, doing things like audio normalization, so the audio across your channel is nice and normalized and level for a great viewing experience. Another thing you can do to improve the quality of your channel is to stream in HD online. So many of you are unfortunately stuck with just standard definition channels still on cable, but most of your content is high definition. So one way you can get that out and improve the viewing experience is through online streaming and over the top. And another way, of course, to expand viewership is to reach new viewers through streaming and over the top channels, as well as social media streaming. So moving on to accessibility, just ways you can expand your accessibility. Of course, you could begin to caption your channels live on cable. You could also caption if you're streaming 24/7 live, you can caption on those streaming channels. Likewise, if you're offering streaming video on demand and over the top, you can caption there as well. And captioning isn't limited to just English. You can also caption in multi-language, which is great for reaching more of your community and important segments of your community. Another thing to think about with accessibility is leveraging closed captioning for transcript search. So as long as you're captioning your content, this becomes a new way for folks to not only discover content, but search your content, and they can search on that captioning. That's particularly great for meetings and allowing your viewers to find specific topics of interest within meetings. So that's another great reason to caption your programming. And another area of accessibility is secondary audio programming, which many of you may be thinking about. So these are all great things to strive for. Of course, anytime you're looking to implement and expand, one key consideration is how much time and effort is that going to take. And that's really where automation comes in and is really a key part of this, because if you don't have time to do all these great things, it's not going to happen. So this is where automation is key. And this includes things like automatically scheduling and automatic scheduling, automatic graphics, automatic closed captioning, so that you're not actually having to take the time to do this and edit, other automatic workflows. And on top of all this automation, a few other keys to point out that we will talk a little bit about today. That includes the flexibility of being able to work with IP video. That's becoming more and more important, as well as remote operations becoming more and more important. Of course, whether it's because of social distancing or a lockdown from the pandemic, or just continued flexibility, the ability to operate your channel remotely becomes more and more important. So let's talk a little bit about the Hypercaster. That's our playback and automation platform, and the version 7 series of releases. I'll talk a little bit about the key themes in those releases. And really one of the key themes has been centered around automation, as well as expanding viewership and accessibility. So Hypercaster version 7, we call it where automation rules, because we've added a number of business rules based automation. So these include things like time saving, rules-based automation around scheduling and graphics in particular. So rather than scheduling and manually scheduling individual elements, it's all about setting up rules in advance, and everything just runs completely lights out automated. A few other themes in Hypercaster version 7 include live meeting and video conferencing integration, obviously very important in these times, as well as remote operations and new features like NDI, and we'll also talk about live captioning. So first, let's talk about live meeting coverage. Again, this is one way to expand programming and expand viewership, is to begin to integrate more live meetings. So a few different ways you can bring in meetings over IP from these modern platforms like Zoom, WebEx, GoToMeeting, a few different workflows. One, from your meeting location, wherever that stream is being originated, you may send that stream back to the station, integrate it into master control, and then from your station, go back out to the cloud for live streaming and social media streaming. So that's one pathway. Another is you may go from the meeting directly to the cloud first, and that way you can get out to over the top and streaming and social media, and then from there pull back into the station or push into the station as well. So a few different architectures. Now the Hypercaster itself, one thing that's really important here is the flexibility in both live and specifically IP sources. That's really important to make it easy to take in all these different types of meetings, whichever platform you're on. And just a quick list of the various live and IP sources that the Hypercaster supports, whether you're working with traditional SDI or modern NDI. Those are both supported. Of course, video routing switchers if you're integrating a large number of baseband video signals. You may be integrating traditional transport stream. That's typically in DevSpeak UDP and RTP, supporting unicast and multicast and whatnot. That's been around for a very long time. Modern HLS, that's Apple streaming protocol. RTMP push and pull, which is great to be able to do both. And we'll talk a little bit about how that's really important for bringing in Zoom meetings. RTSP is another protocol that's a little more legacy, typically used with traffic cameras, for example, and webcams. There's a modern protocol called Secure Reliable Transport, that's SRT. That's really interesting because it's great for high quality, high definition streaming over the public internet where you don't have any guaranteed quality of service. So that's another one that the Hypercaster supports, and you're starting to see more adoption of SRT. And the Hypercaster can also, in addition to these various IP protocols, it can also pull in YouTube and Facebook Live events directly, which makes it really flexible. So let's talk about how this maps to the different meeting platforms out there. So Zoom is one of the most flexible when it comes to IP streaming, which makes it really easy to integrate in your playback chain. Zoom itself supports native RTMP streaming. So directly from the Zoom cloud, Zoom can push in an RTMP stream to a custom location. So because the Hypercaster supports both RTMP push and pull, you can bring Zoom in directly, Zoom live meetings without having to pay for any expensive, third-party cloud streaming services. You can go directly from Zoom right to the Hypercaster. If doing so, if you had an issue with your firewall, and you couldn't accept that RTMP push directly in, there are a number of ways you can work with that. One is you could stream directly to Cloudcast, our streaming service, and then the Hypercaster can do a pull from Cloudcast using the HLS protocol, and that's very firewall friendly. Zoom does not stream over the local area network, though. That's just an important thing to note. That stream from Zoom would always be coming from the cloud, not on your local network, even if the computer that you're running the Zoom meeting on is on your local network, that same network as your playback chain. Zoom can also send directly to YouTube and Facebook Live. And because the Hypercaster can play directly from YouTube and Facebook, that's another way you can effectively get into master control. So very flexible with Zoom. Looking at some of the other platforms, WebEx does not support native RTMP streaming. You can't stream over the LAN. It doesn't support YouTube. It does support Facebook Live. So if you're using WebEx and you want to easily bring those meetings into your Hypercaster, Facebook Live is a great way to get that done. We look at other meeting platforms, whether it's GoToMeeting, Skype, Google Meets. Many of those others don't have any sort of built-in streaming capability, but there's a really cool way you can still bring in those live streams using an open source program called Open Broadcaster software. I know many of you are probably familiar with that, but that's a great way. You can really use that with any meeting platform, to be honest. And just to talk a little bit more about that, Open Broadcaster software, it's effectively an open source live production application that can run on a Mac or PC. And one thing you can do is tell Open Broadcaster to tune in to the application window that's running the live meeting. So if you have the Zoom client running or the GoToMeeting client running, whatever it is, you can tell Open Broadcaster to tune into that, add it to the live production, and then Open Broadcaster itself can stream that on the LAN. So that does support LAN-based streaming, can go to YouTube and Facebook Live. It supports all the protocols, RTMP. You can use NDI directly out of OBS, as well as SRT. So that makes it really flexible and a handy way to deal with, again, any meeting platform. So just a quick note on NDI, that's one of the features we added in Hypercaster version 7.1. So again, that makes it really handy to integrate with TriCasters, or if you're using NDI with Open Broadcaster. And with the NDI feature, the Hypercaster is able to automatically detect all available NDI sources on your network. It includes automatic firewall management. So even if you have a portable TriCaster and you move it around, it'll detect that, and the firewall works automatically that way. We included a built-in NDI access manager. So if you have NDI sources that are on a different subnet, it will automatically discover. That's all built right in. And other features like dialing in high and low quality setting, and all of the scheduling and series scheduling features in the Hypercaster work with NDI sources just like all the other sources. So in addition to meetings, which again, this is a great way you can expand programming and viewership as it becomes easier to incorporate these live meetings through IP streaming. You can grow your programming that way. IP streaming is a great way to add programming in other ways. For example, peer-to-peer programs. So maybe you have a neighboring station that is streaming live events on the internet. You can now tune directly into those IP streams and and schedule those on your channels easily. You can ditch satellite receivers and the related fees and bring in programming like Classic Arts Showcase and Free Speech TV and Democracy Now!, which are all available in different streaming formats, NASA TV as well. And as I mentioned, YouTube Live and Facebook Live is a great source of tons of live event programming you can tap into. Of course, one caveat with all of this IP streaming content, you need to make sure you have the licensing and the licensing rights to rebroadcast. That's always something that's important to double check. So, you know, with all of these live IP streams and meetings that you can bring in, now we get to the automation side, because if it's going to take a lot of time to do this, it's going to be really hard to add all these sources. So the automation becomes really important. And one of the other really nice features in Hypercaster version 7 is automatic series scheduling. And this is great for automating all of your episodic and recurring programming. And it works both for live and file-based sources, but very powerful for live sources. And in fact, when you're bringing in live sources with the auto series scheduling, what's nice is not only the scheduling, but all of the signal routing and resource management is automated under the hood. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. So for live programming, the automatic series scheduling will manage the live schedule itself. So that's when it's actually airing live. It will manage the recording as well as the replays. And you set this all up through rules for each of these series to define what the live pattern is, what your replay pattern is, and then everything is automated under the hood, all the routing, events, and scheduling. You don't have to touch it. So you can set this up a year at a time, just pick your live source and go, and it's 100% automated. For file-based programming, it will manage your playout, of course. There's no live or record or replay consideration. That's just the playout side. And what's nice with the series scheduling is we support a few different rule types to make it really flexible. So one rule type would be most recent, which basically tells the application when you have time slots to fill, how are you filling it based on how the episodes are coming in? Are you filling it with the most recent, or the closest episode, or a pattern? And with pattern, that's kind of neat, because you can do things like if a producer dumps, you know, a whole bunch of shows on you right at the beginning of the year, and you want to schedule it so it emulates more like it was coming in over the course of the year, you can set up a pattern to define how you want to repeat and cycle through not only the existing episodes, but new episodes as they come in. Another nice feature with the auto series scheduling is it will automatically fill missing episodes with the most recent available. So again, that's part of that automation. If for whatever reason you didn't get a file in from a producer, they forgot to submit it, who knows what happened, it will, you know, wait till the last minute possible and then automatically fill that time slot with the most recent, so you make sure you don't miss an episode of that program. Here's just a couple of screenshots to show you what the series scheduling automation looks like. On the left side, you can see your top level metadata, giving your series a name. You would pick your source. Where is the source of the series? Is it, you know, a given live feed, for example, or is it file-based? The expected duration. Here's where you could just check, I want to automatically record and or automatically go live. If you're going live, you can pick one or more channels. Additionally, if you're recording, you can set the metadata template. So as you're recording files and they're coming in, how are they named and what does the program metadata look like? And what's nice is we support variables, so you can set that up to include things like an episode number or the date of a meeting, and it's just automatically named that way. Then for live events, you can set up your live schedule. So this is when it actually airs live and when your recordings will happen. And it's very flexible. You have daily, weekly, monthly. Obviously, you set your time. You can set up repeats, pick which days of the week, date ranges. And the other thing that's nice is you can chain multiple of these time slots together. So it becomes infinitely flexible. You're not limited to just saying something like Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 8. You could have also Tuesday at 4 and Thursday at 12, whatever you need, you can set it up that way. So that will define your live and recording schedule. Then on the right side, you have your playout. So if you're recording these live events, this is now your playback schedule. or the replays. And the replays, they can have their own time pattern, again, just as flexible, and you can chain multiple time slots together. So what's nice is you go through, you set this up once, you could set up, a year's worth of live events, the records and the replays, fully automated. And when you're done, that's it. It's just lights out. So it really ties in nicely. You can start to bring in these IP feeds, new sources of programming. You use the series scheduling, and it's not going to take up more time, and you'll just be able to add more programming and expand your viewership that way. I mentioned a little bit the intelligent signal routing. This is also part of the automation with series scheduling. And this is really flexible. Whether you, for example, if you have a Hypercaster AIO, which has SDI baseband inputs directly, there are a few architectures that folks are deploying. In some cases, you may put a video routing switcher, what we would call upstream of the Hypercaster. So there you would have various live sources, they go through your switcher, and then they pass through the Hypercaster as they go out to air. And one reason why you may want to do that is the Hypercaster has a lot of integrated processing. So it will do things like graphics, and maybe you want your graphics over your live events too, or automatic up and down conversion, or calm audio normalization to make sure your audio levels are all good. So that's one path. Another path is a little more traditional. You may have the playback feeding your routing switcher which then goes out to air. So maybe when you're doing live events, that is not going through the Hypercaster, it's just passing through the switcher, and you may not get the advantage of the integrated processing. Or if you're dealing with SDI inputs directly, or IP inputs or NDI inputs directly, those all go directly through the Hypercaster, obviously no routing switcher. But however you're set up, the automation behind the series scheduling is smart enough to know exactly how to get any of these live sources to the right input or output based on your settings. So you don't have to worry about sub events or having to make sure a switch is set up properly to get a signal into the AIO or out to the channel. All 100% automated, makes it really streamlined. So also back to live events, another important part of live events, of course, you can't always 100% automate. Sometimes you need to be involved in live events, whether it's monitoring, or sometimes you may have a live event that is running long. So there are things you need to do to interact, and we've streamlined the dashboard in the Hypercaster to make it really easy to manage live events right from the dashboard. So the revamped dashboard is completely responsive and mobile friendly. You can access it from any mobile phone. And this is where you can do things like, if you have a meeting that's running long and you want to extend it so the next programming doesn't kick off, you can easily lock it right from the dashboard or right from your phone. Likewise, when that long meeting is done, you could unlock it, or you can have automation to automatically unlock it when signal is lost, when someone shuts off the camera. And then it'll automatically go to a join in progress overlay and join in progress to your regularly scheduled programming. So these are all the types of things you can do. You can quickly schedule any of your live sources, almost like a switcher. All these IP sources you can schedule right from the dashboard to go live on your channels quickly or record. So really handy. And another thing we added in Hypercaster version 7 is built-in channel confidence monitoring. So this is also something you can do right from the dashboard. It's also great for live events where, especially if you're remote, you may not have visibility, and with the confidence monitoring right on the dashboard, you see real-time preview of all your channels, full motion with all the processing that would be going on, including graphics. It's compatible with all major browsers, tablets, phones. And I'll show just a quick video here I'll play just so you see what that looks like. And this will show a 4-channel Hypercaster. You'll be seeing the dashboard, and you'll just see that right on the dashboard are all 4 channels. You have a real-time confidence monitor. So I'll cue this one up. So you can see complete with graphics and everything right from the dashboard. And this is fully responsive on a mobile phone that works equally as well. Great for remote operations, of course, and general confidence monitoring. Another nice feature of the confidence monitoring is a picture-in-picture. It allows you to snap out one of your channels, and you can place it and resize it anywhere in your workspace. So if you're doing other things, you may not want to be staring at the dashboard itself. And I'll show a quick video of what that's like. So here it's just popping out this particular channel. And now I'm doing other things. I'm working on Photoshop and resizing and just keeping that in the corner. So another great feature for remote operation, somewhat related, is in the Hypercaster AIO version 7 added a dedicated preview and test channel. So this is kind of similar to the confidence monitoring, but it's a completely separate channel from all of your live channels. And you can use this for testing programming, testing live feeds right before a live event, or maybe you're doing some graphic overlay design. But it works just like those confidence monitors in that you watch it and you view it right in the dashboard, which is also great. That means you can preview and test from anywhere remotely. Just while we're talking about some of these features that are great for remote operations, another one that was new in the Hypercaster version 7 series is browser-based uploads. So in addition to using FTP or Samba to get content into your Hypercaster, you can now use any web browser from any device, tablets, phones, right from your mobile phones, and very easily upload single or multiple files at a time. You can just drag and drop them right on the screen or click browse to pick them from your operating system file picker. The Hypercaster uploads are 100% resumable. That's a great feature where if you're uploading a really large file and your internet connection drops out halfway through, or you accidentally close your browser, that would be sad if you had to start all over again. So with the resumability, you can just restart, you drag it on the page again, and it's smart enough to know exactly where it left off and pick up from there. And it also works over both secure HTTPS and HTTP, which is important for security. When you're uploading, you get real-time progress. You'll see a time estimate, so it shows you estimated time remaining, makes it really easy to upload programming into your Hypercaster, especially if you're working remotely. So we've talked a lot about bringing in live sources and how you can schedule those live sources and finding new programming that way. Now let's talk a little bit more about the file side. So programs and file sharing platforms. These include things like Telvue Connect's Media Exchange, which we'll talk a little bit about, as well as archive.org, are two great sources of programming for community media stations. Telvue Connect is our cloud-based broadcast content management platform. It has a number of features, but one of the great features is it makes it really easy for your contributors to deliver content directly to your station. So that's what we're showing in this diagram here for the Connect Cloud. This is where you have your contributors, community-generated content. You may have studio broadcast contributors. And in Connect, you can assign them a user account, and they simply drag and drop upload their programming from anywhere. And up in the cloud, it will automatically process it. It will normalize the audio so you make sure you're getting a consistent product, and then it can automatically deliver it right to your Hypercaster along with the metadata. If you want to have a workflow moderation, so you have a coordinator on your end who gets an email alert when new program is submitted, you can set up a workflow as well. And in some cases, you may have trusted users that you feel you don't need that workflow gate. They're allowed to just upload and have it flow directly through. So Telvue Connect, not only can it take in content and make it easier to bring in new content from your contributors, you can also assign time slots to your contributors directly. And not only does the content flow down to your Hypercaster, but so does the scheduling. And now you're effectively pushing that scheduling workload out on your contributors to fill their time slots. So that's a nice way to really expand programming and save a lot of time on your end. Another aspect of Telvue Connect is what we call the Media Exchange. And rather than a way to get in content from your station-specific contributors, the Media Exchange is a way to share programming with other peer community media centers. So that's basically an open portal. If you don't already have an account, reach out to Telvue. We'll set that up for you for free. And that's a place where you can go in and get things like the daily Democracy Now! Episodes and tons of great programming that the community is sharing. The Media Exchange also supports, in addition to that global portal, there are private portals that are supported as well. To give you an example, there are some regions that run their own private media exchange, like in Massachusetts, they have what's called the MMX, and that's where they share programming with all the Mass Access members. Vermont has the Vermont Media Exchange, and we've done this with a number of regions, and that's a great way to have more of a private group sharing experience. All of the content you're pulling in from the Media Exchange or from Connect also ties into that automatic series scheduling feature. So again, you can make this completely automated. To give an example, with Democracy Now!, that is uploaded to the Media Exchange as a series. So every day the new episode comes in and automatically adds as a new episode to that series. In the Media Exchange, you can license not only individual media, but you can license an entire series. And when you do that, it's now automated. Every time a new episode comes in, that'll automatically be added to your Media Exchange account, and that's available to use and schedule. Furthermore, if you have the Media Exchange automatically distributing to your Hypercaster and you've set up series scheduling, now it's completely hands-off. You could have Democracy Now! Scheduled for a year. It knows to automatically fill those time slots with new episodes, and every time a new episode is syndicated in the Media Exchange, it will just flow through, and you have complete hands-off scheduling of every new episode of Democracy Now! And of course, you can do that with other great content and series that are being added to the Media Exchange regularly. Here's just a screenshot of the episodes view for a series in the Media Exchange. And just one other tip, sometimes people don't know that this is available, but within the Media Exchange, you can get email notifications. So down below, it just shows some of the types of email notifications you can receive, but some of the great ones, if you're part of a private sharing group, like MMX or VMX, for example, you can get an email alert every night of any new programming that had been uploaded to that group. So, and they have links right in it, and right from there, you could go check it out and add it with a single click. So a great way to discover new programming. Likewise, you can get an email alert whenever a new episode is added to a series that you're licensing, or whenever an affiliate agrees to your licensing terms. If you're sharing content, you may want to be able to track and see who is downloading and using your programming. And within the Media Exchange, there are full reports, so you can do exactly that. In addition to Media Exchange, I want to talk a little bit about archive.org. That's another great place to find programming for your channels. It's also a very interesting option for free deep cloud archiving. So archive.org offers free unlimited storage. It's a great way to just shuffle off all your programming and make sure that it exists out there. You know, the one thing, of course, to keep in mind is that if you do publish content to archive.org, you can, of course, set your licensing terms, but it is going to be out there for anyone to view. So if you, for whatever reason, wanted to keep it private, maybe that's not the best option. If that's not a concern, it's a really good option. And one thing that's nice is the Hypercaster integrates natively with archive.org. So you can one-click archive all of your programming from the Hypercaster right out to archive.org. If you were then to delete your content on your Hypercaster, you'd see these grayed out thumbnails. That means it's archived, but you don't have it locally anymore. And then what's really cool is if you ever wanted to retrieve that content, all you need to do is schedule that media element. And then the archiving module is smart enough to know to go fetch it again from archive.org. So it sets up a really nice workflow to be able to offload content up to archive.org and then pull it back down whenever you need it. Great, so moving on from expanding viewership and programming, we'll talk a little bit about how you can improve the on-air look and feel of your channels. And one of the features in Hypercaster version 7 that helps with that is the automatic overlay rules feature. And what that does is automates branding, program announcements, news ticker sponsorships, and more. So rather than have to get involved with scheduling individual graphic elements, just like those series scheduling rules automates your scheduling, the overlay rules automates your graphics. And the automatic overlay rule supports a number of trigger types. We support time triggers, which would do things like on the fives, program-based trigger when certain programming starts at the start of programming, at the end of programming, things like that, or maybe continuity. That's another trigger when you're going to your default. And the overlay rules allow you to set frequency, whether that's one time or on an interval. So you can do things like when a certain program starts, now every 5 minutes show a particular branding or a program announcement element. Very flexible that way. And likewise, the overlay rules allow setting various criteria. So you can set up the rules to apply only to specific channels or specific series and categories. They can be set up for running only during certain day parts or date ranges, like during election cycles, things like that, as well as triggering for live versus replay. So a lot of flexibility on that. And here's just an example showing a screenshot of a few rules, things like showing a squeeze back news ticker whenever we're in default programming, or showing a logo every 1 minute for 30 seconds, a next up teaser every time a program starts. So it's nice. Again, you just set it up and then it's fully automated and you can really add a lot of zing to your channels that way. Here's just an example of the overlay rules conditional to be able to tie certain rules to only play during certain series or categories. And here I'll just play an example. You can see some of these overlay rules in action. You'll see there's a logo triggering on and off during this clip every 30 seconds. At the start of the program, you'll see a now playing announcement that's automated from the rule. Then as we get near the end of the programming, you'll see a next up announcement. And then once it gets into the next program, there'll be a squeeze back news ticker. So we'll just watch this. It's about a minute long and you'll get a sense for what you can do with those graphic rules.
Ending racism, hate crimes, and the murder of innocent Black people won't be easy.
We live in a country steeped in institutional racism going back 400 years.
We all need to act. White people, people of color,
young
and old.
It takes work to be anti-racist. Do the work.
Do the work. Listen, really listen to Black voices.
Black people shouldn't have to do this alone. Do the work. Hold a vigil.
Call words of hatred, bias.
Reach out to a Black or brown friend who really needs your support.
Do the work. Get others involved.
Do the work. Vote. This won't end until we all work to end it. How are you going to do the work?
And then into your next program with a squeeze back news ticker.
So good afternoon. Lieutenant Governor and I are here.
Okay, great. So let me move on here. We've talked about the graphic rules and how you can add more zing to your channels with all your graphic and branding elements. Another great automation feature that helps with viewership is on the audio side, taking care of your audio levels. This is especially important as you bring in so many new sources of programming. The audio levels could be all over the map. And we have a feature in the Hypercaster, which is the automatic calm loudness control, which in real time will level your audio between programming and make sure it's a consistent experience, whether those are live sources, SDI, IP, file-based, archive.org, wherever you're getting that programming. And that's a really great feature. Here's just a really quick example. I'm going to play a short clip. You'll hear the audio and see what it looks like on a level meter. So this first clip is going to have some pretty wide variations in audio. So this is unprocessed without the automatic calm plugin.
This global preview is brought to you in part by Leon's Fab Feb Freeze event.
Stay away from my son.
When you play Lotto 649, you've got a chance at the jackpot.
Paul and I have a goal
to find, fix, and
So it
flip
started off at a
houses
pretty
in 1
normal
year.
level, then you had a very hot section and then a low section. And I'll just quickly show the,
Cadillac ATS from the ground up to be the world's best.
and here's the same with the automatic calm processing on.
Part by Leon's Fab Feb Freeze event.
Stay away from my son.
When you play Lotto 649, you've got a chance at the jackpot.
Paul and I have a goal to find, fix, and flip.
And you can
4
see it's
houses
consistent
in 1 year.
throughout each of those 3 sequences. So that's a great feature, really easy to integrate and implement. You know, you just turn it on and let it do its thing. Likewise, in terms of improving the quality of your channel, another opportunity to think about is leveraging high definition online. So as we said before, if you're still stuck with standard definition on cable, you can stream online and offer your channel 24/7 in HD on your website, mobile devices, and over the top. And the Hypercaster has a nice feature built in called HDSD Simulcast, where it will do exactly that for you. You just schedule a single channel and both an SD and an HD version will be output. HD goes to the internet and SD to cable. It takes care of all the up and down conversion automatically. You just leave all your sources in the native formats. You don't need to pre-convert anything. And it also eliminates the need for expensive downstream converters. And that brings us to, of course, another great way to reach more viewers is to launch your channels on over-the-top platforms. So these are some of the fastest growing platforms that people are using to watch broadcast TV. So the platforms Telvue supports include Roku, Apple TV, and Amazon Fire TV. And this is a great way, again, to get HD directly to TVs for your viewers that may only be able to watch SD on cable. Once you go over the top, another nice aspect is you have access to statistics. You can actually see who's watching and where and what shows. There are new monetization opportunities once you go over the top. Great way to further your brands. So you get your brands in the Roku channel store, on Amazon.com, and in the Apple App Store. And from an automation standpoint, it really doesn't take any extra time because when you publish your programming for streaming and online, once the OTT apps are set up, it's 100% automated. It'll just automatically show up on each of the apps. Here's just an example of a Public Media Networks channel on Amazon.com where you can easily add it to your Amazon Fire TV stick and an example of what their app looks like once you launch it. And beyond over the top, another great way to expand viewership is with social streaming. A number of ways you can do that. The Telvue product, our streaming encoder product, is called the Telecast 2. And what's nice about that is it can send to multiple destinations at the same time. So the Telecast 2 can deliver your live streams and adaptive streaming both to a Cloudcast to integrate on your website, as well as to YouTube and Facebook Live at the same time. And you have full control. You may only want to send certain events to social streaming and others you're going 24/7 on Cloudcast. And it gives you the ability to do that. There's some other solutions. There are cloud-based streaming distribution applications, things like Caster.io is a pretty cost-effective one. Vimeo has their simulcast. That's where you would stream to the cloud first. And then those cloud applications could fan out from there to all your social sites, as well as back to your Hypercaster, leveraging the Hypercaster's IP integration. So a number of ways you can do that. So I was now going to dive into the accessibility side of the presentation. I'll just pause here and see, Mike, real quick, if there were any questions that had come in that you think I should answer at this time.
Well, we did have one question from Kimberly in Burlington that we could probably address here. And Kimberly says that CCTV has been unable to schedule live YouTube events ahead of time because if they update the live link before the program is actually streaming, it won't reliably kick over to the event at the appointed time. Is this an issue with YouTube settings, or is this something that is like a user issue that could be fixed? They basically haven't dug into this question. So I just kind of, I don't know if this is something you can address specifically, Jesse. I got some other sort of questions about this from your presentation too. I could add in here, but I just wanted to get to this here
Sure.
before we go into captioning.
So that's probably good to do a direct follow-up as well to make sure understanding all the aspects. But there are a couple of things you should think about. One is with YouTube Live is whether you have a persistent stream key. So the persistent stream key is important so that once your credentials are set up, if you're using that as part of your series scheduling, you know that it's the same stream source and the same stream URL each time. If it's going to change for every event, then it's really hard to include that in any automation with the series scheduling. That's one aspect. The other one with YouTube is they are very sensitive to how often you're trying to tune into the stream. So if your stream is not actually live yet and your automation now begins to go in and try to access it, if you have too many hits in a row where it's not ready and the stream's not actually live, there's some risk that YouTube could then temporarily block your account. So that's actually really important that your live events are ready to go at the time. We actually include some safety hooks that will only try a certain number of times, and then we're going to give up. So if the stream isn't ready at that point, you really need to make sure. There's a nice feature coming up in the next dot release of 7.2, where you can add a manual trigger where you have all the schedule ready to go, and it won't actually fire until someone says, yeah, I know this live event is actually good and ready to go. And you can just mash that button right from the dashboard, and that works really nicely with the confidence monitoring as well.
I have just, and I want to remind everyone, please, if you want to present your questions in the Q&A section, we'll get to them here before we end today. I've got a couple of quick things before you get into captioning that I just want to either underline or just kind of ask you some questions about, Jesse. I love the idea that came up in a discussion we had earlier this week about leverage, particularly for smaller operations where you don't have much staff time. So the more you can automate, the more you can actually spend your human time on things that are high value, high quality, high meaning for your organization, regardless of its type or stripe. So if it means more fundraising time for you or more ability to be able to do that, the things that humans do well and let machines do the things well, I love it. So this is a great way to be able to have way more impact with minimal human support. So I just want to say bravo to that. The question about streaming to different OTT platforms and social streaming, it can be dizzying. It's hard to be able to gather the metrics well in terms of getting a sense of impact. Is there a good strategy specifically for gathering that data back if you're using Hypercaster, for example, to send out to multiple platforms, so that you're not spending even more time trying to just sort of count the hits along the way to be able to measure impact?
That's a great question. So through Telvue Cloudcast, which is the streaming and over-the-top platform, we integrate natively with Google Analytics. So you can have not only your live streams that are embedded in your site and mobile apps, but also your OTT apps, all aggregating those stats back to your Google Analytics account, where there's, of course, a lot of flexibility in tracking, and you can tie that into your website as well. So that is really powerful, and that's an important and one of the great reasons to expand and move into that territory.
Well, and it helps tell the story of your impact. I think that's extremely important as you're trying to justify your work to other people, or maybe you're working with a department head. Justifying your investment, justifying your impact is extremely important. And then one last thing before I let you get back to the presentation. The overlays are very, very curious. Are any of your customers using overlays for support announcements, acknowledgements for underwriting, things like that?
So yeah, that's a great question. Actually, the very last slide in the presentation, we just took a little detour and we talked about some ideas for revenue generation. And that was actually one of them. It's a great use of the overlay features. You can use that for sponsorships, running before and after programming, in the middle of programming, whether those are squeeze backs or, graphics in the center, however you want to do that. And as we talk about captioning here, you can also do things like get sponsors to sponsor your captioning and the cost of captioning, and then
Yeah.
the graphics to announce.
Yeah, that's actually something that happens a lot in broadcast, right? Where a specific service is being provided by a commercial support. So in this instance, you could, if you know what the monthly cost of captioning could be, that's actually something that you could be, pitching to a non-commercial supporter specifically to say, help us expand our reach by providing X number of dollars for captioning. So it's a great example. I'll let you get back to it. And then again, other questions, please put them in the Q&A section.
Okay, thanks, Mike. So now moving on to the accessibility side, the upcoming 7.3 release as part of the Hypercaster version 7 series will include integrated live captioning. So this is integrated, it's real-time automatic captioning during live playout. That will be an optional add-on for Hypercaster AIO models, as well as ProViews if you have a Hypercaster with external ProViews and some of the other models. It's built in, so you don't need any additional hardware. You don't need an external caption embedder. Likewise, we'll be offering that as a standalone single channel box if you wanted to use that with other platforms. It will support a few different modes. One mode is just full-time captioning, so it's always doing its thing. Another would be only captioning during certain sources. So you may have certain live sources that just automatically trigger a caption during those sources, or for specific series. So for example, you may use the series scheduling. You may have certain meetings that you want captioned and just check off to have those meetings automatically captioned. The live captioning supports multiple source language, so not just English. There are up to 16 languages that can be captioned. Some advanced features include custom language modeling, which is a way to improve the caption accuracy. So with language modeling, you can do things like set up commonly spoken words, names, phrases, and create different collections of those words and phrases that map to different programming, and that helps the AI-based captioning engine do a better job. There are other features like automatic substitution and, of course, profanity filtering. And your live records with the automated captioning will preserve the captions for replay. Plus, it will include integration with Connect, which already supports captioning, automatic captioning for file and video on demand streaming. And with Hypercaster 7.3, there's tighter integration there to automatically caption your programming, your file-based programming content as well. So just some screenshots here. You can see on a source-by-source basis, when you set up, for example, a live stream, there'll be a new option here to automatically caption that source. Likewise, on a series, a new option to automatically enable captioning on a series basis. If you turn that on, some of the settings include what the source language is, whether you're using a custom language model. There's some other lower level settings as well for tuning. And here's just an example of a live caption. Let me pull up this video.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I thought as we approached our August recess that this was an appropriate thing to say. May we who are merely inconvenienced remember those whose lives are at stake. May we who have no risk factors remember those most vulnerable. May we who have the luxury of working from home remember those who must choose between preserving their health or making their rent.
So just a quick example there. And in addition to live captioning, another feature that's already available in 7.2 is secondary audio programming. And the way that works, of course, you need to make sure that end-to-end and your cable provider set up for that. But with that feature enabled, the Hypercaster will then manage multiple stereo pairs of audio, for example, 2 stereo pairs. So your recording and your playback is actually recording and outputting 2 stereo pairs. So you can have, for example, English and Spanish. But again, important to make sure that if you're thinking about exploring secondary audio programming, obviously you need to have that in the source of your live events, or if you're bringing in files and you expect the SAP to be there, it has to be in the source. And you need to make sure, of course, that your cable provider has all the downstream equipment in order to be able to pass that through. In addition to live captioning on Hypercaster, which again is coming in 7.3, Telvue Connect supports already an automatic captioning service that is great for file-based captioning. So post-production, this would include for broadcast workflows as well as for your streaming and over-the-top workflows. So what's nice, for example, this ties in and works with the media exchange. So if you had programming you wanted to share with other stations, you could have Connect automatically caption it. It would then embed 608, 708 captions directly in the broadcast files that is made for each station that is licensing it. And when they download those files, of course, the captions would then follow the file. And because 608, 708 is a prevalent standard, anyone who's playing those back on their whatever playback platform they have would automatically get the captioning. For streaming and OTT workflows, that captioning, of course, is then available to be viewed within the Cloudcast streaming player and within the Roku, Apple, and Fire TV streaming applications. Connect's automatic captioning service supports many of those advanced features I talked about earlier that's going to be coming in the live captioning. So that includes things like the custom language modeling for improved accuracy, substitutions, and profanity filtering. And as I mentioned earlier, another great reason to begin to caption if you're not doing it already, it's not just the accessibility, but also for searchability and discoverability. So Cloudcast, for any content you upload that already has captioning, or if you're using the automatic captioning built into Telvue Connect, those captions then become available within the video player for transcript search. So now all your meetings are fully searchable. Of course, you may still want to use the chapter and indexing features of Cloudcast, but in some ways, the transcript search is even more powerful because you're not limited to finding and searching on a few places that someone may have marked off. You can let your viewers search for whatever they're looking for, whether that's an agenda point or some specific content, and then they'll see the caption and can click directly on the time code or the caption to get right to that spot in the content. So that's a really powerful feature, particularly great for meetings, of course. And in addition to captioning and caption search, Connect also supports multi-language captioning. So with multi-language captioning, once the automatic captioning has occurred, you can additionally choose to have it translated to over 100 different languages. So I think it's unlikely you would probably offer 100 languages, but what's great is you could just go in and pick, for example, the handful of languages that are really important to your community. And now that's a great way to expand your accessibility. The captioning's automated, the translation's automated, and once it's done, it's available there for your viewers. And whether they're watching on your website in the player, they can, of course, pick whichever language, and likewise in the OTT apps. You can select from multi-language that way as well. Great. So that covers the accessibility side. And I really have just 2 more slides here. So let me get through those, and then we'll see if there's some questions to answer. So again, this wasn't quite dead on the topic of the webinar, but I did want to just talk a little bit about revenue generation features, something that's always on everyone's minds. So just a few things to be thinking about. There's some miscellaneous features here and there that might be helpful for you. One, in Cloudcast, it supports a banner ad feature where within your Cloudcast player, you can set up to have a banner rotation. Each one of those banners supports click-through, and that can be a great way to sell sponsorship or even advertising on your website directly through your video portal. Likewise, you may consider selling sponsorship spots within your InfoView community bulletin board, or if you're using continuity playlist in the Hypercaster. But as we discussed earlier, the overlay rules are a really powerful way to fold in sponsorship directly on air, because it's very flexible. It works over any programming. You can tie it into your rules. And that's really a great feature to look into. And as we discussed earlier, you can tie that into your closed captioning as well, a way to bring in sponsors to help get your content captioned and then give them the appropriate shout out on air. For OTT apps, I know many community media centers will offer the OTT apps free, but you can also think about as a way to monetize offering your apps for a fee. And there are various ways we can help you set that up. On our near-term roadmap, we actually have two monetization features in particular. One for Cloudcast is the ability to integrate Cloudcast within a paywall. So if you have your own member management system, or you may want to do your own monetization through your member management system, it'll be very flexible and supports all the privacy, so that would be the only way viewers would be able to get at the content. They couldn't skirt around your membership policies. And another one is pre-roll advertising. So those are some revenue generation features to think about immediately, and a few on the roadmap. And then finally, a quick roadmap update. So beyond 7.3, 7.4 will continue this theme of advanced workflow. So whereas so far we have a lot of automation around the scheduling, around the graphics, around live captioning, the 7.4 release will add advanced workflow rules that allow you to set up rules that would say which programming or which series would automatically, and then here are some of the things, the rules: publish to Cloudcast in which collections, or automatically archive to which one of your archive servers, or to archive.org in which collections, or automatically send certain events to live, to YouTube Live and Facebook Live, but not others. Some live events you may need to bypass on the internet because of licensing rights. And likewise, automatically share into the media exchange. So these are a lot of things you can very easily do today. Some of them just require either a single click, or you can do it in bulk, but we're just gonna kind of tie the bow on that automation and make this all rules-based. You just set your rules and then it just goes. And as I mentioned, on the Cloudcast and streaming side, we're adding a paywall integration. We're adding dedicated mobile apps, as well as podcasting. So you can pick which one of your programming you would like to include in one or more podcast feeds, and Cloudcast will automatically extract the audio and generate an iTunes compatible podcast feed for you to publish. So that concludes the slides. And Mike, let's see.
Yeah, we've got a couple of questions here, Jesse, too. I mean, one is really actually, I think, two separate questions about indexing and captioning. One is if the captions and chapter indexes, are they viewable on OTT apps? I'm not sure if I'm getting precisely what they're getting at there, but go ahead and
yes.
get to that. And then there's a separate question about chapters and indexing with Granicus too. So go ahead.
Sure. So the answer there is yes. The chapter and indexing feature that works across both the web-based player, which is also mobile friendly, as well as the OTT app support chaptering. And likewise, I should say on the flip side, the captioning search currently is in the web video player and mobile only. So the caption search isn't yet integrated in the OTT apps.
And then there's sort of a secondary related question. Can chapters and index info be imported from Granicus? This person says that their city partners do the indexing on Granicus, but they'd like to have it on their site without duplicating much work.
The Cloudcast indexing does support a few different import formats. So if you have, for example, if there's a way to export that information from a database, whether it's something like a CSV file, that can be imported and will automatically carry in. If we were dealing with, someone migrating from a different platform into Telvue Cloudcast, there are other options where we may do that in a fully automated way, and that's a conversation we could have directly.
Great. Then a couple of questions about captioning and costs. One is very, very simple question. What's the cost of captioning? Is it a monthly subscription cost, or is it a per minute charge? Because there are different types of formulas for that type of data work. And then secondary question, can it be added on to a monthly or annual contract?
Right. So the way we charge for our captioning service, both the Connect captioning service that's great for file-based, for broadcast and OTT, and the way that's going to tie into our live captioning feature in Hypercaster version 7.3 is it's just based on usage. So you effectively buying, a bucket of captioning, some number of hours. You can always, add to that. And whenever you buy those hours, you can use it however you want, whether you're using it on the file-based side or the live. That's how that all works out. And then, there are different tiers. Obviously, the more you're buying, then there can be increased discounts.
So really, the suggestion you'd make to a customer would be to figure out what your budget looks like for the course of a year in terms of your captioning need, and then work backwards from there in terms of thinking about how to set up that bucket, if you will.
Yeah, and then also, of course, ties into what do you want to caption? Is it mainly your meetings? Are you looking to caption, everything? And there's some trade-offs between whether you just want to go 24/7 live and just let your play out caption everything, or you're going to be doing some post-production. A lot of content may come in captioned already. And then, of course, there'd be no need to duplicate while that's going out to air live. So there can be a blend from a quality and accuracy standpoint. The live captioning, obviously, it's a little harder to caption live than if you're doing that in post. So files that you can caption in post, it's better to do that. You can crunch in that longer. You have more time. The artificial intelligence engine has more time to create more accurate results. Whereas live, you got to get it done live. So there are some interesting workflow nuances that also can relate to some of that budgeting. But of course, anyone interested, we could help you fully understand to work through what's going to be optimal for your station.
And one of the things that everyone should know is that ACM has really kind of been a leader in terms of making sure that we think about the policy recommendations for what communities should be doing with captioning. We're happy to help you out in terms of figuring out what your sort of policy and legal needs are for captioning, because nonprofits, local governments, and educational institutions all have sort of different types of responsibility under the captioning regimes. And you want to make the best decisions to be able to be legally correct and good for your community. We think it's, from a policy standpoint, that captioning is good for everybody because of those very things that Jesse was talking about a little bit earlier in the presentation. But ACM is also happy to kind of help you out if you need some policy think-throughs in terms of how to use captioning correctly. I think that's let's see if there's any other open questions here. One last thing here. Let's make sure I can read this here. Are you considering other OTT platforms in addition to Fire, Apple, and Roku? And then we'll probably wrap it up.
So the answer is yes. We are looking at other platforms. We're seeing, quite a bit of growth in smart TVs, and TV manufacturers starting to launch their own app platforms, native to Samsung, and you name it right down the line. So we're looking at ways to integrate as well. I think we focused on what are really the big three to start, and that's something we'll continue to look at.
And then one last quick one. I know you mentioned this a little bit earlier in the presentation, and we're actually a little over time, but I want to make sure we get to this. Somebody asked about importing video and metadata into Telvue from a YouTube or Facebook feed. I believe you said you could do that a little bit earlier in the presentation. I've heard about some work-throughs that people are using YouTube as sort of a back end to kind of get video into systems, particularly in remote environments. That's possible in your system, right?
Right. So you can basically, directly play and record live events from YouTube and Facebook Live right on the Hypercaster. And, that serves a few different purposes. We know stations can use that to just pick up new programming. So that's a great way, all sorts of live events that now becomes really easy to add. Other uses are effectively using that as backhaul. You may have a live event you're trying to get on your channel, and you might have the best bandwidth from wherever you are going up to, YouTube, which has, kind of an infinite CDN. And that may be the best way to round trip it back into your station versus trying to go over the public internet you know, dealing with firewall issues. So, you know, it's kind of a mix. Sometimes it's just great as backhaul and can be really effective that way, or you're picking up very specific programming that happens to be on those platforms.
Yeah, and it may also depend on content, because YouTube does screen for certain types of content. So I would suggest if you were doing I'll say a concert series, may not be best for use for YouTube, because they might flag content that may not have licensing clearances. So it's something to consider, but it is a useful hack to be able to have that secondary support. You know, we run over time. This has been great to have the discussion, Jesse. One last question for you. How can people get more information and get a hold of you?
Okay, so of course you can always email sales@telvue.com. But I also want to say specifically, you can email me directly. As I said earlier, I really missed that we're not all together this year, and missed that in-person time. I really cherish that opportunity to talk with everyone at the national conference and that time at the booth. So to make up for that, I invite you to email me directly at jlerman@telvue.com, and we can just set up an appointment to have a one-on-one video conference, just as if we were at the show. You can ask me whatever, we can do demos, and the whole 9 yards. So would love to hear from you. You know, you can email the sales team or email me directly, and would you know, love to talk further.
I really appreciate you taking the time today to share sort of perspectives and thoughts and solutions, and also appreciate the work that you guys are doing generally to help all of our folks across the country meet people where they are and provide content that's meaningful for folks in the community. So thanks so much, Jesse. I really appreciate the time.
Yeah. And thank you, Mike. And also want to say how much we appreciate what the ACM does for the community. And from, you know, our vantage point, it's really been amazing seeing during this very difficult time, you know, that value that the ACM provides, all the collaboration. So many stations had to scramble and figure out how to do some pretty sophisticated things from a technology standpoint really quickly, and all the collaboration and teamwork. Everyone's getting it done. That's been amazing, and just shows how strong and great the organization is. So hats off to everyone.
Indeed. Thanks again, everyone, for joining us here today. We have recorded today's presentation. So this is available for you in case you weren't able to see all of Jesse's material during the course of today's proceedings. You'll be able to get a link from that. And then be sure to join us for other workshops and partner presentations that are taking place for the rest of this fall. Find out more about them at the ACM website, allcommunitymedia.org. And you know, you can even have other people in your organization join in if you want more information about different types of workshop activity or other presentations that are happening for our partners. From everybody here at ACM, thanks so much for joining us. Have a great Thursday.
Thanks, everyone.